The day she suggested an open marriage, the world didn't shatter. There was no dramatic music, no sudden downpour outside the window, just the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the weight of her words hanging in the air between us. "It's to save us," she said, her voice soft, reasonable. "To bring back the spark." And I, desperate to keep the US she was talking about, agreed. Primera, loved. I thought love meant being willing to do anything, to bend until you almost break. Who's too old on? At first, it was strange. A surreal dance of unspoken rules and forced smiles. We'd share our evenings, ask about each other's dates, with a kind of clinical curiosity. I tried to see it as she did, a modern solution to a timeless problem. I told myself this was progressive, that we were evolved. I went on a few dates myself, clumsy encounters that felt more like job interviews. They always ended with me feeling hollow, a profound sense of dislocation washing over me as I drove home to the woman I actually wanted to be with. She, on the other hand, seemed to flourish. A new light entered her eyes, a vibrancy I hadn't seen in years. She had stories, laughter that echoed with experiences I wasn't part of. She was dating one person primarily, a man named Alex. She described him as just a friend, someone safe who understood our arrangement. "There's nothing serious there, I promise," she'd assure me, her hand on my arm. "You're my home. This is just exploration." I chose to believe her. Believing her was easier than confronting the alternative. The cracks started small. A text message I glimpsed over her shoulder, a heart emoji next to his name. A phone call she took in the other room, her voice dropping to a whisper. When I'd ask, the explanations were always ready, always plausible. It was just a funny meme, or he was having a bad day. I was just cheering him up. Each explanation was a smooth, polished stone, and I, the fool, kept collecting them, building a wall of denial around myself. I didn't want to see the pattern. I didn't want to admit that the foundation of our honest arrangement was starting to feel suspiciously like deceit. One Tuesday, she told me she was going out with her girlfriends. I remember kissing her goodbye at the door, the scent of her perfume lingering long after she'd left. I spent the evening trying to write, but the words wouldn't come. A strange restlessness took hold of me. On a whim, I decided to go for a drive, maybe grab a late-night coffee. I ended up near a part of town we rarely visited, a quiet street lined with cozy-looking restaurants. And that's when I saw her. She was sitting at a small table outside a dimly lit Italian place. Across from her was Alex. It wasn't the fact that they were together that hid me. It was the way they were together, the way his hand covered hers on the table, the way she looked at him, her head tilted, a soft, intimate smile on her face that I hadn't seen directed at me in years. It was a look of shared secrets, of a world that didn't include me. There were no girlfriends in sight. I didn't confront them. I just drove home. The image burned into my mind. The silence in our house was deafening. When she came home hours later, humming a cheerful tune, she told me what a great time she'd had with Sarah and Emily. She described the terrible movie they saw, the gossip they shared. She painted a detailed, intricate atelier, and with every word a piece of me crumbled. The problem wasn't the open marriage. The problem wasn't Alex. The problem was the lie. She wasn't just breaking the rules of our marriage. She was breaking the rules of our new arrangement, the one supposedly built on radical honesty. The next few weeks were a slow-motion nightmare. I started noticing everything. The business trips that coincided with Alex's days off, the late nights at the office from which she'd return, smelling of a cologne that was unmine. I became a detective in my own home, a stranger to the woman I had married. You felt a cold hard knot of anger and betrayal tightening in my chest, replacing the love that had once filled that space. The open marriage wasn't an escape hatch for our relationship. It was a Trojan horse. She'd used the language of freedom and honesty to smuggle in deception and infidelity. The final confrontation was as quiet as the beginning. I didn't yell. I didn't throw things. I just sat her down and laid it all out. The restaurant, the texts, the business trips. I watched the color drain from her face as her web of plausible deniability unraveled. For the first time, she had no smooth, polished explanation. She just sat there, silent. "Why?" I finally asked, the single word carrying the weight of 1,000 sleepless nights. "Why?" The lies. We had an agreement. Honesty. That was the one rule. Her confession came in broken pieces. It had become serious with Alex. She had fallen in love with him. She didn't tell me because she was afraid. Afraid of hurting me. Afraid of losing the comfort and stability I provided. She wanted both worlds. The passion and novelty with him. The security and history with me. In her own twisted way, she thought she was protecting me by lying. But she hadn't protected me. She had dismantled me. She had taken my trust, the very bedrock of our entire life together, and ground it into dust. The open marriage hadn't failed, we had. More specifically, she had failed the one principle that was supposed to make it all work. It's been a year now. The divorce is final. Sometimes I think about that conversation, about her idea to save us. I realize now that our marriage was already over that day. She wasn't looking for a way to fix us. She was looking for an excuse to leave without having to be the one to walk out the door. The open marriage was never about freedom. It was about permission. And the lies. The lies were just cowardice dressed up as kindness. The real heartbreak wasn't sharing my wife. It was discovering I was married to a stranger. Rebuilding is a slow process, but for the first time in a long time, I'm building on a foundation I know I can trust, my own. Thanks for watching my story. If you've ever felt lost in a relationship, remember that your feelings are valid. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories. See you next time. After we agreed to try the open marriage, everything suddenly became very serious. What had once been just a conversation turned into something real, something we had to figure out together. She suggested that if we were going to do this, we needed clear boundaries so neither of us would feel hurt or betrayed. According to her, the only way something like this could work was if it was built on honesty and respect. We sat down one evening and talked about what those boundaries would look like. At first, the conversation felt almost strange, like we were trying to write rules for something neither of us had ever experienced before. She said the most important rule was transparency. No secrets, no hiding things from each other. If either of us met someone, the other person would know about it. She explained that this honesty would protect our relationship from turning into something dishonest or destructive. Hearing her say that made me feel slightly more comfortable. If we were both open about everything, maybe it wouldn't feel like betrayal. Maybe it would just feel like something different from the traditional idea of marriage. Another rule we discussed was emotional boundaries. She insisted that this arrangement was only supposed to be physical and casual, nothing serious or romantic. Our emotional connection, she said, would always belong to us and no one else. She repeated that several times, almost as if she wanted to reassure both of us that our relationship would remain the center of everything. I remember nodding while she spoke, even though a part of me still felt deeply uneasy. It wasn't just about rules or agreements. It was about the idea itself. I'd spent years believing that loyalty meant choosing each other above everyone else. Now, we were trying to reshape that belief into something more flexible. At the same time, I didn't want to seem insecure or controlling. I told myself that if this was something we were doing together, then I had to approach it with maturity. If I constantly questioned it or acted jealous, the entire arrangement would collapse before it even started. So I did my best to play along with the idea that everything was normal. In the beginning, nothing actually happened. Life continued as it always had. We went to work, had dinner together, watched shows in the evening, and talked about our daily routines. For a while, it almost felt like the open marriage was just a concept we had discussed rather than something we were actively living. But slowly, subtle changes started appearing. She became more social, spending more time texting people and occasionally mentioning that she was talking to someone new. Whenever she brought it up, she did it so casually, like it wasn't something that should bother me. She would remind me that we had agreed to be honest about these things. Each time she mentioned someone, I forced myself to stay calm. I would nod, act supportive, and remind myself that this was something I had agreed to. I didn't want to appear jealous or uncomfortable because that would make it seem like I was incapable of handling the situation. Inside, however, it was much more complicated. There were moments when I felt a strange mixture of curiosity and discomfort. I wondered who these people were and what those conversations looked like. I wondered if they made her laugh the same way I did, or if she spoke to them differently than she spoke to me. But I kept those thoughts entirely to myself. I told myself that trust meant resisting the urge to question everything. If we were going to make this work, I needed to believe that the rules we had created would protect our relationship. Sometimes she would ask if I had met anyone or if I had considered exploring the arrangement on my side as well. I could tell she expected me to participate equally, but the truth was, I wasn't really interested. My agreement had never been about wanting freedom for myself. It had been about trying to keep our relationship strong, to give her what she felt she needed. Still, I didn't want her to feel guilty or pressured, so I pretended to be open to the idea. I would joke about it or say that maybe I would eventually try it. In reality, I didn't pursue anything seriously. My heart just wasn't in it. As time went on, I started to notice small changes in our routine. She would occasionally stay out later than usual, explaining that she was meeting friends or grabbing drinks after work. Sometimes she would mention someone she had been talking to, always emphasizing that everything was casual and within the rules we had agreed on. Every time she reassured me, I told myself that this was exactly how the arrangement was supposed to work. We were being open with each other. There were no secrets, no lies, and no betrayal. At least, that was what I was trying to believe. From the outside, I tried to look relaxed and understanding. I didn't ask too many questions, and I definitely didn't let my doubts show. I kept telling myself that this was simply a different kind of relationship, one that required a level of patience and trust I was still learning to find. But deep down, there was a quiet voice in my mind that never fully disappeared. He kept asking whether the boundaries we had created were strong enough to protect what we had built together over all these years. I ignored that voice as much as I could, because admitting those doubts would have meant admitting that the situation might already be changing our relationship in ways neither of us fully understood. Admitting it would have meant confronting the fear that was growing inside me. The fear that this experiment in freedom might be costing us the very intimacy it was supposed to protect. So, I just kept smiling, kept nodding, and kept hoping that everything would turn out okay in the end. But hope was starting to feel a lot like denial. If you're going through a challenging time in your relationship, remember that communication is key. And if you're struggling with your mental health, please know that help is available. Organizations like the National Alliance on Mental Illness and BetterHelp offer resources and support. You don't have to go through it alone. Thank you for listening. Please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. For a while, I kept telling myself everything was working exactly the way we had planned. We had created rules, we had promised honesty, and we had agreed that nothing emotional would ever replace what we had with each other. On the surface, it seemed like our relationship was still stable. We still shared the same home, still had dinner together most nights. It didn't share with me. When I asked what was funny, she would give a vague answer and change the subject. Again, I tried to convince myself it was normal. We had chosen a different type of relationship, and maybe this discomfort was simply part of adjusting to it. Maybe I was just struggling because I had grown up with a more traditional idea of marriage. I didn't want to be the person who suddenly started questioning everything. That would make it seem like I had agreed to something I couldn't handle, and I didn't want to create tension between us. So instead of confronting the doubts directly, I pushed them aside. I reminded myself that she had always been honest with me before. I reminded myself that trust meant believing her even when things felt uncertain. If I started interpreting every small change as a problem, it would only damage the fragile balance we were trying to maintain. Still, the feeling in my chest didn't go away. There were nights when I lay awake thinking about how different things felt compared to before. The rules we had created were supposed to protect our relationship, but sometimes it felt like those rules were quietly becoming less important. What worried me most wasn't just the possibility that she was seeing other people. That part had been part of the agreement from the beginning. What worried me was the possibility that something deeper was happening without me fully understanding it. The open marriage had been built on the idea that nothing emotional would grow outside of our relationship. That promise had been the one thing that made the arrangement feel manageable. But the more I watched the subtle changes in her behavior, the more I started wondering whether that line was already beginning to blur in ways neither of us had expected. For a long time, us had ever admitted, "Welcome back, everyone." Standing there in the quiet kitchen with her phone still in my hand, I felt like time had slowed down in a strange way. The messages on the screen didn't disappear when I blinked. They stayed there, clear and undeniable, each one quietly confirming what I had been trying not to believe for weeks. Up until that moment, I had still been holding on to the idea that our agreement meant something. Even when things started feeling different, I told myself that we were still following the rules we had created together. I believed that honesty was the one thing holding everything together. But the messages told a completely different story. The more I read, the more obvious it became that what was happening between her and that person wasn't casual. It wasn't just part of some experimental arrangement we had both agreed to. There was emotion in those words, attention in the way they spoke to each other, and a level of connection that clearly went beyond what we had promised would never happen. In that moment, something inside me shifted. For a long time, I had been trying to adapt to the idea of an open marriage, because I believed it was something we were exploring together. I thought it was a shared decision built on trust and communication, even when I felt uncomfortable. I pushed those feelings aside because I believed the foundation of our relationship was still strong. But as I stood there reading those conversations, it became impossible to ignore the truth. The open marriage wasn't the real issue anymore. What hurt wasn't the fact that she had been seeing someone else, that had technically been allowed from the beginning. What hurt was the realization that the honesty we had promised each other had quietly disappeared. She hadn't just been exploring the boundaries of our agreement. She had been building something deeper behind my back while continuing to reassure me that everything was still within the rules. That realization felt heavier than anything else. I slowly put the phone back on the counter, trying to process everything I had just seen. My mind felt strangely quiet, almost numb. It wasn't the explosive anger you might expect from a moment like that. Instead, it felt like a deep sense of clarity settling in. For weeks, maybe even months, I had been questioning my own instincts. Every time something felt wrong, I convinced myself I told myself that trust meant believing her explanations and ignoring the uneasy feeling in my chest. Now those instincts suddenly made sense. All the small moments I had brushed aside started replaying in my mind. The way she tilted her phone away when messages appeared, the conversations that ended the moment I walked into the room, the late nights that seemed to appear more frequently. None of those things felt random anymore. They were pieces of a pattern I had been trying not to see. As I stood there, another thought slowly started forming in my mind. It was a realization that felt uncomfortable but impossible to ignore. The open marriage hadn't really been about mutual freedom or exploring something together, at least not for both of us. Looking back, it began to feel like the arrangement had created a perfect cover for something that had already been happening emotionally. The rules we had carefully discussed now felt almost meaningless compared to the reality of those messages. What I had believed was a shared experiment suddenly looked more like a situation where I had been trying to protect the relationship while something else quietly grew outside of it. The hardest part wasn't even the betrayal itself. It was the moment of understanding that followed. For a long time, I'd believed that love meant compromise. I believed that supporting the person you cared about sometimes meant stepping outside your comfort zone. When she first brought up the idea of an open marriage, I agreed because I thought it would protect what we had. I thought that by trusting her and respecting her perspective, we would come out stronger. But now, standing in that kitchen with the quiet weight of everything I had discovered, it became clear that the relationship I thought I was protecting had already started changing in ways I hadn't fully understood. And in that moment, I realized something that completely changed the way I saw the situation. The open marriage had never been the real turning point. The real turning point was the moment honesty stopped being part of the relationship. Once that disappeared, everything else we had built together suddenly felt uncertain in a way I had never experienced before. Sometimes in life, the hardest lessons don't arrive with loud warnings. They appear quietly, hidden inside choices we thought we were making out of love. When this story began, it felt like a compromise meant to protect a relationship. It felt like trust, understanding, and the willingness to grow together. But looking back, it became clear that trust only works when both people protect it equally. An open marriage, or any kind of relationship, can only survive when honesty stays at the center. The moment honesty disappears, the rules no longer matter. Promises lose their meaning, and what once felt strong can slowly begin to fall apart. In T's story, the real heartbreak wasn't the idea of an open marriage. It was the discovery that the openness and honesty that were supposed to hold everything together had quietly faded away. Sometimes we agree to things we never truly wanted because we are afraid of losing someone we love. We convince ourselves that sacrifice will save the relationship. But a healthy relationship should never require someone to ignore their own instincts or silence their own feelings just to keep the peace. Trust is fragile, and once it is broken, it changes the way we see everything. This story is a reminder that love should never come at the cost of self-respect, and honesty should never become optional in any relationship. Thank you for listening to this story. And if you enjoy real-life relationship stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next story. Because sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones that reveal the truth behind what people experience in silence.